It's no surprise to anyone who's learned about ice fishing from In-Fisherman periodicals that one of Editor-in-Chief Doug Stange's favorite panfish rigs is a dropper rig. We'll let him get into the details.
Oh yeah, that'll do. Oh, not big, but that's a nice frying size one right there. And the whole thing we're going to talk about is something that I think maybe half the country, as far as ice fishing is concerned, still doesn't utilize, and that's dropper rigging. And I mean, I've been using this for almost 30 years and talking about it in different magazines for about that long. In fact, I think we first introduced it in In-Fisherman in the early 1980s when we first started to do some of the early ice fishing articles. And it's one of those things in the early days we called a search lure because it's so effective at fishing deep and yet fishing finesseful. And if you look at it, it's just ingenious really. You've got a spoon of some sort as the attractor, and hanging down below 2.5 to 2 1/4 inches, and that is very important, as we'll talk about as we go along, is a little tiny lead head jig. You've got the spoon that allows you the weight to fish very effectively and very quickly down deep, and yet you have the lead head jig that allows you know, a very finesseful look. Something is very delicate. So the combination is just deadly, not just for perch. I use it for crappies in deep water. I use it for bluegills that are very active. I've used it for trout with a little bit of a modification. I've used it for some of the bigger predator species like walleyes, and it's very effective on smallmouth bass. Now let's drop down and see what we can get here. We're in about 16, there we go, 16 feet of water here. And the problem I've had the last half hour has been simply, I'm on fish, but a lot of them are pretty small. So we're working through a lot of fish trying to get a meal here. But I'm sure we'll get the job done. There we go. Yeah, not bad. And what's really cool about this bite right here is that these fish are taking this off the bottom. And this is also, this rigging right here is also one of the things that you can use to actually feel the lure get taken off the bottom, because if you lay this flat on the bottom and this is laying out to the side right there, and you just set the lure, or I mean the line tight enough to lift that front end off the bottom, you will actually feel it when they pick this up. You'll feel the back end move. There are very few lures that you can use that will allow you to do that when fish are working the bottom. And so often fishermen don't think that fish take stuff off the bottom, but they all do. Okay, there's the bottom. Just tighten up and put a little bit of tension on the, and you can actually see them bite very easily. Ooh, not bad. There we go. Again, that little tiny lead head jig is such a great trigger anyway. Come in here real tight once. I want to show you a couple secrets to these dropper rigs. First of all, it is vitally important to keep from tangling that this be no more than about 2.5 inches. Now what anglers commonly think, of course, is that if they will get farther away from the spoon, they're going to catch more fish. But that's not the case. In fact, obviously, you know from your own practical experience that if they're, you know, they'll actually bite a treble hook right here. This is just one step more finesseful in certain situations, but you don't want to get this line too long. The next thing that I would, most of these, you know, I tie these up myself at home. There's a little tiny clip on the end here that just snaps on any, you know, on and off very easily. And then the lead head jig is any kind of blank lead head jig, no hair, no fur. Usually, you know, typically about a 1/64 to 1/32 ounce, and you're just going to add maggots to it or maybe some gulp. You could also add a piece of plastic in many situations. To get that lead head jig to hang about like that, it's very important. You can tie direct and tie that knot tight and then straighten it so it'll hang horizontally. But oftentimes, what I do to keep this lure working really nicely is to tie a little loop knot just above the lead head jig. So this is actually freely riding on the line. And when I swim this thing, when I pump it like that, a lot of times when I'm using a spring bobber tip, this thing will actually flutter and actually kick to the side like that and look very, very realistic. Again, very finesseful down there.